Bible curriculum. My name is Stacy, and today's lesson is called Jesus Defends His Authority. Jesus defends his authority. He shows that his power is from God. When the Pharisees attributed Jesus' healing of a demon-possessed man to Satan's power, Jesus said a divided kingdom cannot stand. The Pharisees refused to recognize Jesus as the Messiah because their hearts were not right. Jesus gave them the sign of Jonah, whose 3 days and 3 nights in a fish was a picture of Jesus' time in the grave before his resurrection. Our key passages are Matthew chapter 12, verses 22 through 28, chapter 12, verses 33 through 42, and Romans chapter 10, verses 9 through 10. By the end of this lesson, students will be able to recognize that people are either for or against Jesus, and explain how Jesus used the Old Testament history to point to his resurrection. And now for our memory verse. This is from Colossians chapter 1, verse 16 and 17. Now, we've talked about this before, but I want you to really consider who this verse is talking about. For by him all things were created, in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things were created through him and for him. And he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. And again, Colossians chapter 1, verse 16 through 17. For by him all things were created, in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things were created through him and for him. And he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. Throughout the Gospels, we read how people were amazed at Jesus' teaching because he taught as one with authority and not as their scribes and Pharisees, who were the religious teachers of the time. So why could Jesus teach with such confidence about the scriptures? Jesus taught with authority because he is God, the author of the scriptures. He could explain the laws of God because he knew them better than anyone, and he knew what he intended when he gave them to Moses. For example, in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus refocused the Old Testament laws on the right heart attitudes behind them rather than the outward rule, which is like how the Pharisees followed the law. Jesus' miracles also showed his authority, and his works were gaining attention. He was casting out demons, healing the sick, and even raising the dead. Jesus raised the only son of a widow and restored him to his mother. Who else did Jesus raise from the dead in our last lesson? Jairus' daughter. Jairus was a ruler of the synagogue, and his only daughter was dying. He begged Jesus to come and heal her, but the crowds following Jesus were in the way, and the woman who was sick for 12 years touched Jesus' garment for healing. Jesus stopped to talk to her, and she told everyone how she'd been healed. While this was happening, Jairus received the news that his daughter had died, but Jesus said she would be well. He went to Jairus' house with the 3 disciples, and he took the dead girl by the hand and commanded her to raise, and she did. Who remembers how old the girl was? 12 years old. As Jesus did after a miracle, often, he told the girl's parents not to tell people what had happened. This was partly because Jesus was following God and the Father's timing for showing his power. As more people flocked to Jesus, the Pharisees felt their authority as teachers of the law was threatened. Now in this lesson, we see that the Pharisees tried to discredit Jesus by saying his miracles were the work of Satan, but Jesus wisely defends his authority. Now turn to the Gospel of Matthew chapter 12, and we'll see what the Pharisees said after Jesus performed another miracle. It's in Matthew chapter 12, verses 22 through 28. Then a demon-oppressed man who was blind and mute was brought to him, and he healed him so that the man spoke and saw. And the people were amazed and said, "Can this be the son of David?" But when the Pharisees heard it, they said, "It is only by Beelzebul, the prince of demons, that this man casts out demons." Knowing their thoughts, he said to them, "Every kingdom divided against itself is laid waste, and no city or house divided against itself will stand. And if Satan casts out Satan, he is divided against himself. How then will his kingdom stand? If I cast out demons by Beelzebul, then by whom do your sons cast them out? Therefore they will be your judges. But if it is by the Spirit of God that I cast out demons, then the kingdom of God has come upon you." So, what miracle did Jesus do in verse 22? He healed a demon-oppressed or demon-possessed man who was blind and mute, so that he both spoke and saw. We have read about Jesus casting out demons before, but this man's demon made him blind and mute. When Jesus healed him and removed the demon, the man could speak and see.